think we're just waiting for our court folks. Oh, it looks like Andrea's there. So great. Andrea, both judges. Let's see, Katie, and then our DOC rep, Aaron Turnhouse.
All right, we're ready to go.
Yeah, so since this group is a little bit kind of ill-defined as far as the larger group, you know, anybody can join, but we do have a quorum with our core group, which would be the executive committee. So yes.
All right, then we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. We probably should. Are there more of, am I missing? Oh, there's 9 of us. 1, 2, 3, 4, 9. Okay. All right. So I think we have no one unusual at our meeting. Not unusual, but not of the usual, right? We can forego introductions.
Yes, I think everybody's well familiar with each other here. Yeah.
All right, then we have no minutes from the last meeting because this is our first inaugural meeting. We would be crashing champagne on the bow if we were launching a ship, but instead we're just in a Zoom meeting. So we'll move on to staff report. Sarah.
All right, got a little laundry list here that I'll run through. First thing, our DEC MOU, the Department of Corrections asked for a language change. So essentially that MOU, we're just recirculating it for commitment to our drug endangered children protocol. Same language as they had before, but now there's, I guess, a different lawyer that looked at it from DOC. So they had some language changes that we're going to be initiating and then recirculating that MOU for signatures. So there's nothing of import that is really changing. It's just more of the language, so to speak, that that DOC would prefer to have. Next thing, we do have our dashboards for January, February, and March in the packet. I won't spend a whole lot of time talking about that, but those are our monthly dashboards that we're continuing to collect the data. It's trending the same, where we're seeing a lesser amount of people being encountered, less amount of people being booked into jail. And referrals are starting to tick up a little bit just as the court cases are starting to process. But really, we're not seeing anything dramatically different in our numbers the last couple of months. As far as kind of a follow-up to our Cjcc meeting, really talking about training on implicit bias. Our member, Carrie Ackland, she's professor down at Stout in the Rehab and Criminal Justice Program. She did offer to have a facilitated discussion and with implicit bias and go through some of those screeners. So if that's something that we would like to do, we can set that up with her, you know, at the convenience of this group. And whether that's done in a meeting or kind of an extra training opportunity, we can do that if the interest is there. But I did send out those implicit bias just screenings that are from the Harvard group. And, you know, I just encourage people to check them out. I did the one on gun bias, and I don't have a gun bias, meaning when I see a gun, I don't think about crime. I think about hunting, you know, so really depending on where you are, you can have different biases kind of based on where you live and how you were raised. But there's all sorts of different bias. So just encourage you to check them out if you can. Outreach to new judges. So this week we've got our two new judges that are going to be with us attending the Wisconsin Association of Treatment Court Professionals. So just really appreciate their willingness to get the training in while they're not even on the payroll. But that's going on this week. They've also been observing, or we've had opportunities to extend, and they're on the schedule to have them observe our treatment court and our family treatment court, that being new to the judges. And then it was a recommendation that we do some EBDM training with the new judges once they get on board. And I just wanted to kind of put it out there if there's other ideas. And Katie, you and I had a conversation kind of about some of the kind of readiness or the outreach to the judges. So if there's other information you want to relay or things that would be important for the judges to kind of study up on before they get going.
Yeah, I had a meeting with the new judges earlier this week, and I've been kind of following up with them. We're going to start getting them involved with judiciary and law, and I'm just keeping them kind of informed, and I'll keep bringing them to the groups as we need them available.
Great. And I guess as training needs come across, to let me know, because we do have a lot of training that's recorded and available, or I can spend some time with them as well. But I'm sure it'll be kind of soaking in a lot of this stuff over time. So thanks for the update, Katie. Let's see, another kind of connection with the new judges. So Arbor Place is really hoping to have a meeting with all the judges, the new judges in particular. They want to talk about the services that they have available. They've got some services for that juvenile population. And they also would like to talk about the social host law. And then we're hearing that vaping is becoming a really big issue in the schools. And Eric, you're probably hearing that through your channels. And that was part of what we're talking about with Arbor Place and prevention. So just want to get that on the radar, folks, that, that juvenile vaping is a big issue out there. Arbor does want to have more stronger connections with the judges, at least get an opportunity to kind of meet and greet and talk about their services. So I'll kind of work to help set that up when the time comes. And then just that vaping piece, I'm not sure what the group wants to do about that, but that's just one of those emerging issues that we've got. Moving on, the Cbdg grant for housing. We did have a rollout meeting today, and just want to thank Chris Korpala for spearheading that just mountainous effort to get some funding for homelessness. So we were working with our partners with Stepping Stones and Westcap to come up with a kind of a flow of the process. We've got funding coming down, and this really is designed for, that emergency housing needs, transitional housing, with our criminal justice population getting some services there. So just that's 2-year grant that'll be through the end of 2022. And we'll be working closely with our partners on that. We already have 2 people that are in our treatment court that needed housing that have it lined up thanks to the new program and new funding. So success already. Moving on, state update. As far as the state is concerned, TAD is most likely going to be expanded. We'll have a renewal at the end of this year. They are putting a lot more money towards TAD, and they're expanding it to include mental health courts. So once we have that announcement later on, that'll be one of the kind of, charges to this group, is really coming up with a plan as far as the funding. So we'll have an opportunity to increase what we have, add additional programs, and really kind of look at the need that we have. But until the grant is kind of really the announcements finalized, we're not going to really know what is fully included in that. And then it also relies on the legislature to pass that budget related to increased TAD. But TAD seems to be very well supported, and they are anticipating that it will grow in the next biennium. Also on the state front, there is a release of the Racial Disparities Task Force. So there is a fairly large report. If anybody would like a copy of that, I can email it to them. But really, it kind of looks across the board. And one of the major changes is potential body cameras for all law enforcement. It contains a lot of different areas, but certainly it'll be important to law enforcement to understand the detail and some training requirements. I think that will also have to be passed, on the legislature. So that's just a report at this point in time, but it's fairly, has a number of recommendations in it that will have implications for our law enforcement if it goes ahead. Update, family treatment court. So we do have a resignation on deck with our family treatment court coordinator. Derek Smith is going to be leaving us. The position, we are doing a trial to transfer down to human services for 90 days to see if we can get some more connections, some more referrals. That program's been struggling with the referrals and really kind of making it more embedded in our child protective services unit. So the new hire, that'll be Courtney Wolf, and she'll be starting on the 17th of May. It sounds like long experience working with human services. So kind of, she knows, people know her and she knows people. She's been working in our community. Coming to family treatment court will be new, but sounds like it's going to be a good change for that program. So we'll keep you posted on that. And then two more things. Chief and I, with the assistance of Brenna Jasper, did record the proxy training video for law enforcement. So it's not quite finalized, but almost just kind of looking at some editing and a couple of different things. But just want to thank Chief for willingness to do that, and really having a staff who did the good portion of it. But we did it all via Zoom, and it was really seamless. So it's just exciting to know that we can do this training in an even simpler format and even have a better end product. So the next part of that is we're wanting to do the pre-charge diversion video. So we'll be working on that. And then lastly, we do want to resume in-person court sessions at some point. So do have a consultation request out to public health to really to help us kind of really talk through and how we can resume our in-person court sessions. Staff certainly have protocols to follow, but we're bringing in groups of individuals as well. So we want to be sure we're doing it in a safe way and we're not overlooking anything, but there is definitely a desire to get back to in-person sessions. So that's it, unless there's questions on the update. All right, back to Chris.
All right. Okay, so Andrea and Sarah and I met last week to kind of talk about what we wanted to tackle in this first meeting of this new group. Sometimes you come up with ideas about what you think things might look like, and then you get a group of people together and that morphs and changes a little bit in a good way. So we thought it might be helpful to just do kind of a brief review of where the Cjcc has been. And then Sarah put together for us a nice document about what are some of the current initiatives, things that the Cjcc is working on, and then have a discussion about where you would like to go. And that would include ideas about what you think the best structure for these meetings might be. So I will start that conversation, or start with two things. One is to say that my overriding goal is that these meetings are relevant and not just a report out, so that we're actually doing some work. I mean, Sarah's going to give us a report because she's got her finger on the pulse of all kinds of things that are going on, but that we really use these meetings to keep moving things forward in our county. And that we were replacing out the plethora of other meetings that we all attended. I was just thinking as Sarah was speaking, it's already gotten its value. I didn't have to hear Sarah do a staff report in 4 different meetings. So there's value to that. So that's the first goal, is to try to find a way to make these relevant, and that you maybe nobody wants to go to a meeting, but that you want to come here. And then the second is to just reiterate, and I guess this will go a little bit to where the Cjcc has been, but even in just the updates, I thought about 2 things that are a direct result of the collaboration, and maybe they're small in a way, but so Andrea contacted me earlier this week, and she said that she had received notification of the national deck training, which is, I think, sometime later in the summer, late summer, early fall. And she said, did I think that there was a way to use federal 4E money that we're using to pay for a prosecutor position to help fund a team attending the National Deck Conference? And so honestly, when I first read it, I was like, small chance of that, but hey, what does it hurt to ask? So I contacted the 4E contact person in the state, and he came back this morning and said, absolutely, that would be a cost that could be covered. So the fact that we have embedded a staff person in the district attorney's office, funded through 4E, that we can use training dollars to help to further the deck cause, that there's an interplay between our agencies, and then really out to other agencies with regard to deck. I mean, like, all of that is a direct result of this group. And that's not an exaggeration. And then the other one was that, and I'm not sure exactly the exact backstory to this, but I know that Sarah and Marshall Maltoff were having a conversation, and Marshall had a bunch of questions about the CDBG grant. So Marshall came to our meeting this morning and had great input to, as we're planning, to the planners, West Kappa and Stepping Stones, to, just some considerations and some offers for assistance. And again, CDBG wouldn't exist. The grant would not exist were we not all kind of collectively, there's some collaboration. And then the fact that Marshall and Sarah were having a conversation that led to questions about that brings Marshall in, that adds valuable input. Like this, when we are working together, it works. And so, so my goal is that you find these meetings relevant, but that we continue to find effective means of collaboration, because we're doing some really good stuff with what we've been given. So that being said, I don't know, Sarah, do you want to give us a little snapshot history of the Cjcc?
Sure,
Not that
yeah.
most people haven't been through that process.
Yeah, because I think we all have kind of different starting points with the Cjcc. So mine was back in 2013 or 14 when I started. It was a large group, right? It was like 50 members of the Cjcc meeting maybe every other month, but the meetings weren't very, I think they were frustrating, and I was just kind of coming in the tail end of it. Coming in as an outside provider, I thought, what the heck's going on here? Because I thought it was like airing dirty laundry in front of the public. But that was just my one kind of outside experience, because I think something was contentious and there was some kind of strong feelings going on at the time. But we really morphed over the years. So right when I got started, we had a strategic SWOT analysis done by Stout. So we brought in their innovations center, and they came in and did a kind of a day and a half or 2 days of kind of SWOT analysis. And over the course of the semester really helped us develop a map to move forward. And part of that map was we really felt that these larger groups were not as effective as we could be. So that's where we looked at our internal bylaws and really shrunk our council down to 19 members. And that's grown through the years. I think we started with 15 and we've kind of added a couple throughout the years. So we're up to 19 members. We've got our executive committee, which is the main committee, and then we started the work groups. So those task focused work groups working on different items as they came up, and as was warranted by the council. So that's where we shifted to that work group model. And then we had throughout the years, eight or so work groups. The only work group that ever was concluded was the deferred prosecution work group that that Andrea had started early on, right when she just came to us. So so that's kind of a brief history. So, I think the changes that we've made throughout the years, we're really, to Chris's point, trying to make these more relevant, trying to make it more viable, trying to bring leaders to the table that we could get some consensus on different, areas or policies, and then actually start to move them forward in our different agencies. A lot of the work groups, we've got leaders such as yourselves that were part of them, and then some of them they were delegated to staff. So we had a wider range, of participants in the different work groups, not just this group. But over the years, we kind of, we've moved to that quarterly Cjcc. So then it really was more of a report out. And I think we're all ready for a change. And that's really what led us up to creating this operations group. And it really gives us an opportunity to kind of look at how we're doing our meetings, look at how we're relaying information, look how we're interacting in our relationships, and to see what really is our next growth that we wanted to do with our Cjcc. So Chris, I don't know if I hit on all the points that you were hoping, but I don't want to take up too much time talking about kind of old structure.
Yeah, the only the piece that I would add to that is, Judge Smeltzer, are you with us? I see your name, but I see no face, so I'm wondering if you're here. Apparently not. I was going to say, I think that he's the only, looking at the list of people here that are faces that are here today, I think he's the only inaugural member.
Chris, can you hear me now?
I can, yes.
Yeah, I am here. I've heard everything that's been going on here.
All right. So I was wondering if you, as our as an back at the initiation of the Cjcc, if you cared to comment about just sort of where we've been and then maybe some of the change that you've seen over this ensuing 12 years or more.
Well, a comment I would make, it was a lot different when we started. We weren't sure where we were going, but we thought we would know when we got there. So anyway, what I'm seeing is it's so much different now what we're doing than how we started out, because it was really a lot of tugging to try to get people engaged. But I think the culture has changed quite a bit, both with county administration support and each of you that have decided to step up and get involved. And I think it's shared leadership has been the big change, and the opportunity for many different folks from very different departments, et cetera, have stepped up and provided some leadership, including from the county board. And I think that's kind of just the growing process that we had. I just would give an assessment right now. I think you are all at a good place, and you can continue to work effectively on doing the things that we need to do in Dunn County. So I think, it was hard work, but I think we are in a good place. So compliments to all of you.
Anyone else have anything to add about the where we've been piece? Then I will have Sarah share what we have most recently been doing or what the current initiatives are of the CJCC.
All right, so I'm trying to share my screen here. And now I gotta move that, Okay, so hopefully you see the document that was in our packet about just our, the list of activities. Do you see that?
Yep.
Okay. So we've got our finger on the pulse of all sorts of different things. And, you know, some we're more involved with, and then others are just kind of on the fringes. There's a lot of things that are done with the CJCC, but then we also have connections with a lot of other programs, initiatives, partners, and different things. So this isn't fully inclusive of everything, but I tried to kind of also include some of those tangential contacts that we have. But we've got initiatives. So these are kind of defined as initiatives. EBDM, that's where we had that work group really looking at kind of that lens of EBDM. Stepping Up, that's reducing the incarcerations for serious mental illness and substance use. That's a national initiative, so is EBDM. Data-driven justice is also a national initiative that we're formally signed on, and that's really we're using our local data to help inform decisions. So we're continuing that. And then locally, we had the alcohol initiative. So that was something that came out of our local data saying, hey, we've got a lot of continued alcohol-related crimes. And what can we do to educate our population? So we've had activities going on with all those different areas. As far as the work groups, communications was really focused on coming up with ways to help facilitate our communication internally, but then also externally. So as far as forums, publications, trainings, recordings, they've really helped us really create those things. And then we also have had social media postings, just really trying to get our name out there, the CJCC. We have our logo. We wanted to kind of get our name out there, get more name recognition overall. Data, so that group has, been focused on collecting the data, publishing the data, both on that monthly and the yearly look, but then we do different reports. One is the annual trends over time. So that's where we get all of our kind of a 10-year trend data. We typically have delivered that about once a year to the CJCC. And then just starting last year, the recidivism project. So that's a project that we want to do and report annually to the CJCC. That program or that project, since it is already established, we did our first report. It's just really continuing to look at the data and then continue to report out on some basis. And then data's help with ad hoc projects. So like OWI really dug into the data there. And we've got the ability to do that. So Katie Shalley's led up the data group, and that was probably more staff people. We've got our records people from law enforcement and different things. Our data keepers or collectors were part of that group. Communication, but that was a fairly small group that was led by Brenna Jasper, and she has a background in communication, so it was just kind of a natural fit for that group. That group was small and really just kind of focused on specific tasks as they came across. EBDM, so that's where we have the treatment alternatives and diversion oversight of the grant. So that's our top program, but then also the assessment protocol. That group did approve the implementation of a new pretrial tool. So we've got the public safety assessment implementation, and that's largely the role of sanding or criminal justice assessor. EBDM really was designed to help us look across the system and opportunities to improve with evidence-based practices and evidence-based decision-making. And data was a big part of any of those decisions. So that's where we did our systems mapping in the past. We did, we gathered, surveys and inputs on different things that we needed to work towards. So that's where we got, the proxy came out of that, the, pre-charge diversion, all sorts of different things had come out of our early years with EBDM under, we had Judge Smeltzer was led that group, and Judge Peterson and Chief Atkinson. So it did kind of shift focus depending on the chair, but we've had some work to do. We kind of had a natural pause, I think, with that's part of when Jim Tripp kind of assumed the role, and so that's why I think it is a good time to bring this into the broader group. So it is more of an initiative across the board in everything we do, and not so much a specific work group. DEC work group, so Andrea leads that, and that's really been focused on just continuing that coordination, collaboration, having just that our law enforcement and human service partners working together. But then also the training and education piece for DEC has been a big emphasis. So we still have some activities that we want to work on with the DEC group, and really want to keep that that kind of the cohesion of that group, so we don't lose momentum and it fall apart. Stepping Up, that work group was led by Chris Corpola, and we kind of changed that in a number of years. We kind of focused on that and kind of went and evolved. That's where our reentry program came out of. That's where our crisis intervention team training emphasis came out of. And lately, through our sequential intercept mapping, the two priority areas came out as housing and enhancing crisis options. So the housing bit, as we gave an update on the Cbdg grant, Chris was really, taking leadership there and really seeing how we can start to solve some of our housing challenges. And then the enhancing crisis options, so that we have kind of a subgroup out of Stepping Up, and that's led by Wendy Winger out of our human services. To really meet and explore different opportunities, some of the challenges. We know that law enforcement spend a lot of time dealing with mental health crises, and that takes them, away from doing other duties. And this has been an ongoing issue. I think it's just becoming more pronounced as other issues are becoming maybe less pronounced. Family Treatment Court, oversight and planning. So that group was also kind of discontinued, but those functions still need to be carried out. The oversight of Family Treatment Court, and then the oversight of our treatment court as well. So we did have an advisory group that has been discontinued, and that will be one of the expectations that I have of this group, is the oversight of those programs. Other oversight responsibilities, largely having to do with grants and programs. So we've got some that are related to grants, reentry program, TAD, TOP, Family Treatment Court. But then we have some other programs that are not grant based that still need that oversight. So treatment courts one, and then the pre-charge diversion, that's a DA program, but we've kind of all collectively helped and pitched in and gave our feedback on that program. So while maybe it's not a direct oversight, it's certainly something I think we want to keep improving and on our radar. Other activities, data that I see for this group is really looking at the data, having that data available to help inform the decisions that this group makes, reaching consensus on shared goals and shared activities, things that are important to people. We want to move those. sometimes good ideas aren't important to others, and then, you know, they aren't moved. So I think it's important that, you know, whatever we want to work towards, that we all are putting our effort to work towards that, and bringing our agencies along as well. I think that's been some of the historic challenges where we get the leadership buy-in, but then it can get disconnected when it gets down to the rank and file. But I think just more, the more we can reach consensus and collaborate on what we're really hoping to accomplish, we're more inclined to actually have those. Responding to grant opportunities, we've got that on the actions for our agenda today. Just, you know, you got to know what you need, you got to have those relationships, and you got to be able to respond quickly to the grants. And we've been able to do that in the past, and I think that's definitely an advantage of this group meeting more often for us to continue that. Education and training of best practices. So really, you know, letting us know what's important, what is needed, so we can put that training together or research the best practices in those certain areas. And then certainly state and national updates, even agency updates, really sharing what's going on in our different agencies as far as challenges, and especially those that have overlap with other departments, divisions, and offices. Some of the affiliations that we have out there. So we've got Menominee Police is doing a lot of different things. They've got Project Hope. They got their youth response teams out in the schools, and then the One Mind campaign that they're starting. So there's a lot of similar efforts going on, like-minded efforts that we can collaborate on. UW Stout has their program advisory, so we continue to be part of that, and really, you know, system-wide want to create opportunities for students so they're more prepared for the workforce in the long run, but that they actually have relevant coursework related to the field. Health Done Right Coalition. So I know Dave Bartlett and Chris Corpla, you guys are active in those groups. So they've got a housing group, they've got a alcohol, nicotine, and drug group. Just other groups that are broader. So not just that criminal justice, you know, where we're kind of focused on criminal justice population or the system, that's really county-wide. So, but there's some good efforts going on there. And we want to be collaborating. We don't want to be duplicating. We don't want to be competing. We want to be collaborating. So I think that groups and our connection to the groups, I think, is important. And then bringing that information back to this group is important as well. Dunn County Partnership for Youth, that's something that we're involved in. You know, I'm involved in monthly as kind of representing the Cjcc. I know Menominee Police participates in that, but that's just another, you know, area that's really focused on prevention and youth that I think is underutilized, or we don't partner as much as maybe we could. Crisis intervention team training. So this is where we've got the partnership with Eau Claire Police that we get, if we help out with the training, we get reserved seats for Dunn County law enforcement agencies. So we want to continue that. And then we also have relationships with our partners down to the south in Buffalo, Pepin County on our reentry program. And then they are really spearheading the Veterans Reentry Project that we are also involved in here and have our Veteran Service Officer working on. So just some connections of other activities. Some of the associations and other groups out there, WCA. So I participate in the Justice and Public Safety group that meets twice a year on that. We've got the National Association of Counties also on the Justice and Public Safety committee there. They meet, they've got monthly meetings and then have a couple of larger meetings, but really focused on best practices and sharing innovations across the system. That's been a big advance. I think both of those associations been very helpful to us in really bringing home the best practices, but then also allowing us to share our progress with our peers. Wisconsin Association of Treatment Court Professionals. So that's just the association that oversees treatment courts. So we are involved in that, and we've got staff that's hopefully going to be part of the board of that group, but that really oversees just that consistency across the state and adherence to best practices. And then I also participate in the state Cjcc, the TAD subcommittee. That subcommittee's changed its title a lot of times. Behavioral Response Committee, Problem Solving Court Committee. Now it's called TAD Committee, but it really looks at diversions, treatment courts, and then connects that to the overall state Cjcc. Other projects of interest that have emerged, OWI court, just the interest in developing a court, addressing failures to appear. We still put a lot of resources towards failures to appear. Youth justice, so prevention, diversion, deflection, truancy. Those have been topics in the past. Enhancing crisis options, housing, that racial justice and equity inclusion that's becoming more and more pronounced on the state front, really talking about equity inclusion as a response to systemic racism or systemic challenges that we have. And then a recent recommendation from our DOC rep, Aaron, was really, what can we do to address the low risk population that's on probation? If we can come up with some diversion away from that, those are, the research says that we should be focused on those higher risk, higher need people. So having low risk people on probation really allows less time to be put towards those high risk, high need folks. And then some upcoming projects. As I mentioned, the TAD expansion for 2022. There's going to be more funding and more things that are going to be allowable, like mental health courts. We've got our Cbdg grant that's getting ready to roll out here in just a couple of days. We've got the public safety implementation. And then, of course, we've got our new judges, as we discussed earlier. And then finally, just some of the considerations as far as the governance of the Cjcc. So we're created by the resolution of the county board. We're expected to do an annual report. I do monthly reports to our Judiciary and Law Committee and our Admin Committee. We've got our bylaws and membership established by the bylaws. So if we have adjustments, we need to adjust our bylaws or make sure it's consistent. And that really governs our leadership of the Cjcc. And then the directional plan would be the other component, just that as far as a policy of the county is to have a criminal justice policy. So an implementation plan was developed, and it largely kind of falls back on what we're doing on the Cjcc, collaborating, reaching consensus, creating opportunities for people in a fair and equitable way. So that's the quick rundown of kind of the stuff that we're doing.
All right, that's a lot. Okay, so now we move on to the where do we want to go? And this is the part that I would seek your input on into what would be a meaningful way for us to structure these meetings on a monthly basis. So yeah, so I guess just to kick that off, and I really do want us to decide kind of collectively what we'd like it to look like, but I've thought about, so we have just some areas of consideration. So we do have oversight over TAD and the treatment courts, reentry, and there's some of those programs that we probably should factor in some period of time each month for at least an update. Probably the closest we'll have about reporting out, but just some kind of update on those areas of oversight. But we could limit that. We could do some of that. Yeah, we could do that pretty quick, I think. And then the other thing I think about is looking at what our upcoming challenges and or areas of collaboration that we might want to look forward, put our brains together to for the future. So if we want that sort of as a regular agenda item, but outside of that, I open it up to say to you what would be a meaningful structure for these meetings. Go ahead, Eric.
I would just offer up a suggestion as once we get past the roll call and that kind of good stuff, we look at structuring, having, of course, our report out that Sarah might need to update us on information that's pertinent to this group. But then putting like a set like time, like 5 minutes, for example, for each of the topics for where we have the oversight. So that way those things do get covered. And we know if there's adjustments that need to be issued. I would also suggest that we allocate a time, and this is certainly up to the group because this is merely a suggestion, taking 5 or 10 minutes of the time. Are there any kind of topics or things that we should be looking at addressing, almost like a brainstorming type session for this group, emerging trends in the United States or emerging trends in our region that we should look at, and then take some time if we have some projects that are identified or initiatives that this group is planned out, allotting like a 10-minute time for that. So essentially kind of just structuring our meetings in these time frames. So we know we have a set amount of time for this topic. We have another set amount of time for that topic. So that helps us keep moving and addressing certain issues. And it keeps long-winded people like me from talking forever too. So that's my offer for a suggestion.
We'll build on what the chief says, and it is earmarked in the same vein about trying to keep these meetings more or less to an hour, the lunch hour. And I've said this for executive committee as well, but I'll suggest order of business that we address action items first. Put it at the first of the agenda, which does include, of course, that there's background material that we need to understand in order to take action. That we will count on getting that background material, which primarily falls on Sarah, as part of the action item itself. But let's handle action items up front and first, and then to the extent that we have time for the reports from Sarah or the brainstorming idea from the chief, which I think is a good one, although we may embarrass ourselves with the crickets chirping when we ask for that one, then we can do that subsequently. We can have times we can expect when there's sufficient number of action items that we simply don't have time for anything else, but that would make the best use of the time we have, in my opinion.
Thank you. Others? This is the time where you all talk.
Well, the chief and I already used our time, so we have to be shut up now.
I know. Yeah.
This is the brainstorming portion. The mobs are still spinning.
When it comes to brainstorming, I find my ideas have difficulty getting out because they're lost in a vast cavernous space.
Another potential option. By the way, I totally appreciate what Mr. Miller said. I think he's spot on with moving action items up towards the front. If it's of interest to the group too, it may be worth bringing in for someone the last 5 or 10 minutes from the community that is offering services that might potentially be of use for this group, or just kind of keeping that in the back of our minds that this could be a good platform for something like that for consideration, whether it's education on our part or for helping an initiative we might be working on.
Rod, did you have something that you wanted to add?
Well, there's a couple things there. One, when you said about the oversight function of this operations committee, And how often does like family treatment court or TAD, how often do you need the updates? And I'm not so sure you probably need all that information every month, but at least as part of the oversight, you could probably have a more comprehensive report from like family treatment court, where the coordinator comes in and you really look at the hard data, what the issues are, just to update. But you wouldn't have to do that every month. I mean, if you could just stagger it, so you're focused on one group 1 month and maybe another group another, so we don't try to squeeze too much in at one time, that could be helpful. The other thing, I think, Eric, or I think you were mentioning something interesting, and that's very important with Cjcc, about having folks from the community that want to come in and say, this is what we're doing. Because you remember the Criminal Justice Collaborating Council, it's kind of that collaboration between all of us that work in it, but also reaching out to the community so the community still has input when it's relevant. So I think that's healthy, but how that happens, but I think that's a good idea, at least to give them an opportunity to have some, I guess, contact with us. I'm done.
Yeah, well, I appreciate, Rod, the point about monthly oversight, because I think our dashboards do cover the kind of the
Right.
stats where you get that monthly update. But if there's issues that across the board issues that could be a conversation or need an action. But I do like the idea of kind of bringing in somebody to do more of a comprehensive report. And what we could do is like come up with an annual kind of calendar when we do bring in, or kind of schedule certain oversight responsibilities, so we're not having to bunch them together or don't bring them in.
So, and summarizing what I'm hearing, if we put action items first, and then if we create a schedule of updates for things that this group needs to provide oversight to, and then I'm thinking that we might, I guess this would be a suggestion I have, and I like Eric's suggestion about time and timekeeping, because I think that's helpful. If we provide some opportunity, I mean, I just listed out some of the entities that were clear that are here at the table. We have the Cjcc, the courts, the DA's office, DHS, the MPD, do so, probation, the clerical courts, which again, that kind of goes with the courts, but sometimes have separate issues. If we provided some time, again, on a rotating basis for just a update from our partners about what is their area of importance or interest to them, because that, with the invitation that if there's someone else that's interesting to, you might create some whatever building together of 2 or more entities that are interested in tackling a particular area. And then that sort of feeds regularly into, or feeds naturally into Chief's suggestion about just doing kind of a brainstorming. And maybe that's just we can think about a format for that, but maybe that's just what do we need to be attending to collectively as a group. And then if the one thing that I would say about speakers is only that we are also looking at using some topics education kind of stuff, topical education. We just apply it regularly. Topics of education for the Cjcc group at large. And that might be another area where we could do that. Have some providers of services who could come in and do an oversight for the larger group as well, because we all are a part of that. And I'm thinking, like Our Place and the Bridge to Hope and those various pieces that touch our system. So that would be one other format for that. Or we could do some type of topic, education topic every other month or something. It's just that someone can't generally do too much justice. I've learned this from my all staff meetings, can't do too much justice in even 10 minutes sometimes. Sometimes I think speakers generally need about 20 minutes in order to kind of cover.
I agree with that. And if we only have 1 hour and we don't even have enough time to cover what we need to cover in 1 hour, bringing in a speaker for this group, I think would be, unless it's just a light agenda month, I don't think that there's enough time in our noon meetings to really accommodate. It could be a brief speaker, meet or greet, but yeah.
I think we could build that very easily into the CJCC quarterly meetings. I think that would be a great topic when I think about the people that are sitting at the table, and to hear an update or hear information about what are the services that Arbor Place is currently providing, what are the services that the Bridge to Hope is currently providing, Positive Alternatives, what are some of those other providers in the community. So what I would suggest is we kind of solidify our conversation around what we think an agenda, regular standing agenda would look like. And then we give it a whirl, and then we set a goal of maybe 3 or 4 months in from now to take a look at it again and review it and say, is it meeting our needs? And do we need to do something different with it? Or do we need to do something different with it, so that we don't set it in stone? I think I might have said this in this group, but the illustration I use is when you move into your house, and wherever you put your plates and your silverware is where they're going to live on into forever, because you never move them again. Regardless if it's the most ridiculous spot that you ever chose to put your silverware, you're going to leave it. So let's try, would like to try not to do that in this group, and reevaluate whether what we've crafted is working, or if we need to tweak it or change it. Any other comments about that? All right, Sarah and I will put our heads together, and Andrea will put our heads together and try to come up with sort of a draft, sort of set agenda, in a sense, of as close to that as we can get. And then we do have an action item. So the DOJ CESF grant, Sarah.
Okay, so this is the second round of Department of Justice coronavirus emergency funding. The first round, this was in your packet, but I'll just really briefly cover it. First round, we contributed $58,000 in grant money towards our IT upgrade. Some of those projects were in the works, but we were short on funding. So the grant really helped us, use that funding for the intended need. These grants are designed to really mitigate the effects of coronavirus. So it's really related to the safe operations of the courtroom, safe operations of law enforcement, and safe operations of the jail. A number of things are allowable. And we did have a meeting back at the end of December and talked about some of the ideas, because DOJ thought this grant was going to come out really quickly at the beginning of the year, which it never did. But essentially, previously we talked about some gaps and needs that we had. So we discussed 3 UV sanitation devices for use in the jail, the sheriff's office, and then also the courthouse, the courtroom. Things could be moved around. So whether it was put in the courtroom or a jury room, but we looked at these devices. We discussed the need for UV sanitation for squads. It sounds like Menominee Police already secured everything that they needed for that. Not sure about Duzo. We also discussed a UV filtration system for the whole judicial center. So we do have a quote back on that, and that is allowable under this grant. And then we talked about possibly having iPads or devices at libraries or town halls where people could go for a virtual Zoom appearance. That could be allowable if it was only used for court. So I think we've got some logistical challenges with that. And then, just kind of giving heads up about this opportunity, Sheriff could use this new metal detector that's about $15,000. I'm not sure if that would be allowable. The rest of the stuff is, but we would have to connect that to COVID, or that kind of tie that logically into COVID. So that's kind of a recap of the different projects we just discussed before. So what I'm hoping, my recommendation is that we, go for the funding to help us fill in any gaps that we have, that we identify the projects that we need. We do have some estimates on some of these things. And then I would be happy to write the grant. And then as we did with that first round, the funds went to the clerk of court's office because she was doing the project, but it was in collaboration with IT and the clerk of courts and the Cjcc division to get the funds, get the project done, get the reporting done, and get the reimbursement back. So similar, process would work depending on the projects that we want to move forward. I talked with our finance department, and they just kind of cautioned that just be careful. There's so much funding coming down that we don't want to double dip or use this funding for something we can use for other funding. So we just want to do it in with our eyes wide open that we're making the best choice.
So you are looking for, Sarah, the endorsement of this group to move forward with working with the parties to identify areas for this grant and then get the grant written.
Yes, we don't have time to talk about ideas right now, so we're going to have to do a separate meeting. But I guess what I'd like from this group is just that okay to do that, put our plan together and move forward. The deadline's the 10th or 12th of May, so it's a quick turnaround.
Okay.
So moved.
All right.
Second.
First from Paul, a motion from Paul and a second from the sheriff. Any discussion about that, supporting moving forward with the grant? Otherwise, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right. And then does this time work for people? Noon? I don't even know what we are. Last Thursday? Are we at Thursday? I don't even know what day of the week it is. Thursday. Last Thursday of the month? Last Thursday of the month at noon?
Well, I guess I would like to make a recommendation. So we do have an executive meeting planned for the last Wednesday in May 26th. Since this group was created, we discuss the executive meeting less often, really just ahead of our Cjcc. So I guess I would make a recommendation that if folks were agreeable, that we have another meeting at each month of this group, and that we have it on Wednesday at noon on the 26th.
The last Wednesday of the last Wednesday of the month
Yes.
at noon. Any?
As I recall, the reason for doing it at noon mostly is the judges. We capitulate to them because they could throw us in jail. But it works best with the courts anyway. So I guess I would recommend sticking with the noon date, noon time.
And hopefully, as we go down the road, maybe it would be a situation where, with Katie, skillfully helping the judges schedule, that we may be able to free up some time during a week that would be compatible with others rather than always doing new meetings. I got to admit, I would prefer that myself, but I've done thousands of noon meetings in the last 24 years, so I guess that's okay. But it does kind of challenge you when you go from a heavy schedule, go into a meeting and you're supposed to be on top of your game, and then go back to that heavy schedule. It's kind of a challenge.
For what it's worth, Judge, I would rather not do noon meetings. There's other things that I try to accomplish during that noon hour, but yeah, I'm willing to go along with whatever works.
I get that. I just threw that out as an opportunity, given when you get a third judge, if we can modify schedules a little bit. At least, Katie, you could have the discussion with the judges and Chris and Sarah and Andrea and just talk about, is there a time during the week that you could use for meeting time, and maybe that wouldn't be a bad idea. And I would agree with Paul. I don't mind doing. I mean, that was just the situation we were in. We couldn't do anything about it. But I think that there might be an opportunity here. Just a suggestion.
Okay. So we would do our next meeting on May 26th at noon, which is a Wednesday. Sarah will send us out a notice or a scheduling invite. And Sarah, you have the next CJCC meeting is April 8th. So,
Yes, I noticed that. It's July.
all right. So we've
I
got
think it's
some time
July.
until then. And the executive committee doesn't need to meet only to set the agenda. Well,
Yeah,
I should say
they would
only
meet
to,
in
but
June.
would meet before that for setting the agenda. So
That's correct.
for at least the next meeting or two, we should be good with the last Wednesday of the month. Anything else? Otherwise, I think we would stand adjourned.